Thanks for joining us for another Healthcare Happenings. I am joined by my good friend and colleague, Sonal Patel of SP Collaborative. Hey, Sonal.
Hey, Betty, how are you today? It's good to see you again, my friend.
Good, good. I'm doing well, thank you. We were just talking a little bit offline, so I know we had not we, you had some nasty weather yesterday, right?
I sure did. Yeah, we had like 3 tornadoes touch down here in Illinois at the end of February, right? Not something that's really seen in winter. Um, so we were blessed with about 75 degrees all day yesterday, so we could enjoy t-shirts and, walk outside and enjoy some fresh, warm breezes. And then, of course, it turned crazy at nighttime. And right now it's about 20 degrees outside. So chaotic weather. Yep. Which is
Yeah,
why I'm in my sweater and not my t-shirt. So it's back to winter again.
that's the Midwest for winters, right?
Yeah,
You
times have
can't tell what
changed.
season you're in at this time of year. So yeah, it just kind of
Yeah,
goes nuts.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
we are here for our quarterly E&M Q&A. So Sonal and I will be answering some E&M questions, and any that y'all have, you can just go ahead and put them in the banner, and we will get to what we can get to, in our time. So I see, I'm looking at, when I was coming on, that there may be some issues
Oh,
with LinkedIn and LinkedIn's connections. So,
okay.
for those of y'all on Facebook and that are watching on YouTube, y'all can just go ahead and put your questions in or anything like that that you have as we're going through. And people from LinkedIn, if y'all, I don't know what is going on with the links, the streaming service we use said that they're having some issues with pushing things out or something. So if for LinkedIn, this doesn't go out until, a replay thing, if y'all have questions on E&M, and want to type them in the messages when someone and I are going through later, we may catch, some of those. But if you're coming in, or as you're coming in, if you get in, make sure you say, give us a hey, so we know that y'all are there. I'm kind of watching LinkedIn out of my corner
Mm,
eye on my other monitor and see that it still shows it's in pre-live. So it still isn't
okay.
popping up on there yet. So we'll just go ahead with our discussion. And if it ends up going as a replay, then y'all can just watch this as a recording today. So luckily, we got some questions that were sent into us from some of y'all prior to the event today, so we can kind of go through those. And Sonal and I, we usually don't have a problem with talking; we have a problem with stopping. So
That's right. That's right. You know us together. We are a dynamic duo and we know how to have fluid conversations. So, absolutely, there's not much dead air time ever between you and
no,
I. So, I think that's
no, not really.
good.
All right. So looking at the questions that we had coming in prior to our session today, we had one on denials of a prolonged service code. So since we're talking about E&M, although the prolonged service code isn't specifically an E&M code, it's in the section, and you have to have an
Yes.
E&M level to do it. So I
Right.
had to kind of truncate the person's question a little bit, because as I pasted it in for us, it kind of ran over
Mm.
the character limit. So I kind of crunched down some of it. But they said that they are getting, oh, hold on. Sorry. It looks like your stream isn't showing up on LinkedIn. It's an unknown issue. They're trying to fix it. Okay. So it's
Okay.
still an issue with LinkedIn. All right. So we're getting denials for code 99418, which is one of our prolonged services codes that they have submitted to a Medicare Advantage or MA plan for a skilled nursing facility visit that their doctor provided. On their denial, and when they contacted the payor said that they align with original Medicare, which is OM, so Medicare Part B that, we're all used to from the past, for the reporting of prolonged service codes. So when they saw that,
Oh,
they kinda
cute.
didn't know, like what are we supposed to do? Well, this issue, since they're following original Medicare, the thing that would fix this problem or this issue for the person is the fact that Medicare makes up their own codes for prolonged services. So they have G codes for those, and that's probably where the problem is coming, because Medicare, their adjudication system doesn't recognize 99417, 99418. Just it doesn't know what those are. So if those are being submitted to them, it's just going to kick them out because it doesn't know what it is. Just like if you submitted consult codes, right, to Medicare now. Other payors accept them. Medicare doesn't know what that is anymore, so they would kick it out. So that's kind of the issue there. And interestingly, with Medicare, their G codes, and I think maybe that's why they're holding on to these. And someone will give me your opinion when too. I would like they have the G codes that actually are more specific to site of service. So they've got G2212, which is for office other outpatient. And then they have G0316, which is for inpatient observation. And then G0317, which is for nursing facility services. And G0318, which is for home or residence services. And my guess is that's why they keep those G codes, is because they're a little more split up and they can see specifically better where the prolonged services coming and match it up with the correct, E&M code, making sure that everything is matchy, so to speak. What do you think?
I completely agree with you, right? That questioner asked for help, right? Because they're doing exactly what CPT book says to do. Again, CPT is that prolonged service 99418. Great job. However, we have to be very mindful that even our MA organizations, if it's a commercial insurance, which so many of them are, right? You still have to pick up the phone or read online what their policy is. What do they follow? And in this case, they are specifically following traditional, right? So, we always tell our folks who handle the pushing out of claims, the whole reimbursement side of stuff, we have to be able to purchase that additional HCPCS book as well once a year, right? Because that's where all of those G codes are housed, right? You will never, ever see them in a CPT code book from the AMA, right? They are released by the CMS in this HCPCS book. So that's great advice that hopefully this questioner can take to heart. And that, in our opinion, is more than likely why your prolonged service add-on code of 99418 was continually being denied. You should seek more clarity in that G0317 code specifically for the SNF place of service for your claims, right? So I really like that the HCPCS codes really do, bifurcate out into the different places of service codes that are available. So I thought that was a great question in terms of how to quickly rectify the situation before timely filing, et cetera, right? And I thought the CMS also provides, again, a difference in terms of time thresholds as well. I know this particular questioner didn't go in the weeds and ask all of those specific points and parts, but we have to make sure that our documentation also, is really clear and specific in terms of time being met in documentation.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you made about the HCPCS books. In practice, usually when I go into my clients' offices and things like that, if you look at their coding books, most of the time they've got, the current CPT and ICD-10 books, not all the time, but most of the time. But a lot of times the HCPCS books, people are, oh, we don't really use those. And so they'll have a HCPCS book that's in there that's, 10, 12 years old.
Yeah,
And,
from
oh
ages.
yeah, we really, and I'm like, well, okay, but every once in a while, you might want to get a new one just to kind of make sure. But also, if you're using encoders or things like that, those will all house
Those will have it.
the code books in them too. So you'll be able to, look it up that way. A Google search could also help if you just said, HCPCS2 prolonged service codes. It might give you at least some place where you could go and pull them up. But yeah, I think that the specificity in those G codes, then think of the reports, so how many prolonged services are being done in the inpatient side versus the outpatient side versus a home versus, you can do so much more with those than you can with the general CPT codes. And I think that's another thing that CMS, of course, is looking for, is to kind of split that up and see, like they did with the modifier 59 when they made all of our lovely X modifiers, so they could see which one of those criteria it was, so they could kind of drill into it and study them more. So I think that has something to do with when they make these G codes up sometimes, is because they're looking for either something more specific. Sometimes they'll make one if they have an LCD or an NCD, usually an NCD is because it'd be national. So they make an NCD about something and it has to have specific criteria in order to use this code. Well, the code can be fully, if it's a, level 1 code, CPT code, it can be used in many different ways, but Medicare maybe doesn't like a couple of those ways. And so they say, well, okay, but not for that, so they'll make a G code that says the same thing almost, but then they'll add in their little shoot, I almost made it specific criteria to the usage of that code. And by using their G code, you're saying, I'm meeting your requirements and I'm saying it here. So go ahead and make sure I get paid. So, it's always a good idea to check, anytime you get denials like this, not even prolonged services, but you report a CPT code and you get some kind of denial back that says, we don't know what that is. Either the code you entered was incorrect, but if it's correct, then they probably have made a code because of some kind of funky requirement or something. Or, they're looking for certain things. So make sure you check your HCPCS codes to make sure there's not a HCPCS code that says almost the same thing, but is one that Medicare wants instead.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And, with this new overhaul, since 2021, it's definitely a great idea to go ahead and get a relatively new HCPCS manual, right? At least from 2021, to make sure that your office is staying current.
Catch up a little bit, at least into our decade.
Because I know what you're saying, exactly what you're saying. There are so many practices that are still using those very outdated books, from years past. So it's definitely a good idea. If you cannot invest in current books, you should definitely be investing in the encoder types of things, from like your Decision Health or like your AAPC types of products that are available to us online. So you have all of the sets of codes from CPT to your HCPCS types of codes that have to be current on claims going out the door. So yeah, that was a great question.
I'm just making a little note into LinkedIn. Hopefully it'll show up.
Yeah, I still have a sign too that says,
but there's some kind of problem.
Yeah. I still see that up here on my end as well. I don't know what's going on with LinkedIn, but I know everybody can
Okay, so
catch
I
it
put
later.
that out there. Do you see the, yeah, my comments out there. So if people are looking for us, they know that there's some kind of issue. All right. So great. So the next question we got was about cloning, one of our favorite topics. Somebody says
Yes.
they're still saying clone notes. Um, as as great as EMRs, EHRs, whatever you want to call it, as great as they are, as soon as they came out, I think, forever and ever, we are going to see some type of cloning per se.
Mhm.
So this person says they're still seeing them. Am I able to give any credit to my provider for these E&M encounters? And before we touch on that more, just that thread that I was having in my head about the cloning, prior to EHRs, when physicians would write notes, unless they were using templates in their, in their handwritten charts, the note would just kind of flow. Patients here
Mhm.
for this, and they tell them the story. They're doing the exam, and patient says, "Oh, I'm also," or the physician says, "Hey, what's that?" Well, that was how the note flowed. So right inside the exam would be the, "Hey, what's that?" And they'd ask them stuff, or they'd forget something, and so they would add it when they remembered it. You would see pieces of history, exam, medical decision making, sometimes in different places in the note. And, that was normal. Now, some of the EHRs, they take those kinds of things and sometimes pretty them up. And
Mhm.
so they make everything look the same,
Mhm.
and I think that's where some of this cloning stuff is coming from. Sometimes I don't think so much cloning as it is the visual is just very robotic looking now, and very, everything is in its place and nothing gets put anywhere else, unless they're free texting things and adding them in where they don't belong, which again is still okay. But, I think that was part of it. And then, of course, all the templates in the EHRs with the check boxes and everything, that's when the cloning stuff really started to get out of hand, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know you and I have talked about this for so many conversations over these years. And the questioner is absolutely valid in asking that question, right? What can we count? When we see in today's landscape with, what's going on with the patient today at the encounter, especially from the inpatient standpoint. If there is going to be cloning, and copy forwarding stuff that's coming in from so many days past, it has nothing to do with what the patient is in here for today. In that type of a situation, as an auditor myself, I would give pause. Like, am I going to be able to give the proper credit for these types of documents? I would be going back to the provider and providing a query for sure, simply to get a better understanding, as she or he walks me through their day as to what is going to be clinically relevant. And that is what has changed in today's new, you know, way of documentation. So, for the most part, I don't like seeing things that are cloned. So, I really do have to go back, read into the weeds of, is this something that's going to be applicable for this patient today at the encounter today? So, from an auditor's viewpoint, it's a lot more work, right? It's a lot more work if we have that voluminous copy and paste cloned stuff that's going on. Because then our eyes do have to take a look at each and every, piece of documentation that has been pulled over, cloned again and again, to ensure that it is valid today, currently. Um, so I don't know if that really answers the question, but in my opinion, I don't like seeing too
Mm,
much of things that are cloned, because I need to see that it is pertinent for today's encounter. how is that helping the provider making the higher levels of his or her decision making today at that encounter?
Yeah, and I want to continue on this, but before we go, I just wanted to pull up just
Oh, we have
Barbara.
some
Hey,
comments. Oh,
Barbara.
yay.
But she's coming in through Facebook. It says, I could not join from the reminder, but saw your video on the
Oh,
LinkedIn thread. So she is coming in through Facebook. So I also
okay.
put in another message that says, we seem to be running on Facebook. So if y'all have Facebook accounts, so hey, Barbara, we're glad you could find us.
Yes. Thank
So
you for coming over.
there's
Yes.
there's there's some kind of LinkedIn glitch going on right now. It's where it's just not showing over on LinkedIn. So we're glad you were able to come over to Facebook and get us there. So now the clone thing too, I think when you look at it, some of the EHRs also, when a clone note is populated, anything that you change or update will show like bolded. I've seen those to
I
where you
love
can
that.
look through.
Yes.
Well, I think that's good and bad. Good because as the coder or auditor, it'll pull your eyes to it. But also, it's bad in that if you put a whole bunch of them together and you look at, let's say, 4 notes and you see bolding on like one line out of the whole
Oh,
note, you're like, oh, okay. And that just kind of really emboldens the payor to say this is cloned. You didn't do anything but change one line. Now you could defend if you wanted to push it and say, well, that one line means it's not cloned. Yeah, but do you want to go there?
right.
I
Right.
don't think so. So you just have to make your thing specific for today's visit. If you're pulling all that junk forward, and remember too, you don't need all that garbage anymore. We don't
That's right.
have to have the review of systems with 12 things and the
No,
HPI with the location, duration, quality, blah.
no,
You
no,
don't
no.
need all that kind of stuff. You can really craft the note to be just what is going on now. So, just the little couple lines of the history of what they're there for, if it's a chronic recurring problem, or even if it's a new problem. Most of the time, there really isn't the need to go through all of those review systems items with somebody. Now new patients, again, it's different, but same with the exam. Just examine what they're there for today. There's no need to go do all that other mess. So you don't really need all of that checkbox garbage and all that. You shouldn't be pulling forward all that junk anymore. It's just not necessary. So that's the first thing, is that you don't have to do it. But and I was speaking, I think, with Christine Hall, who I found us. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Christine.
Um, I have a client whose EHR is still pulling the 95 and 97 guidelines.
Yep.
So their notes, I'll still show that garbage. So the physicians and APPs, of course, if there's boxes in there, they want to check them, they want to fill it out, they see it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're continuing to put all that over junk and overly done stuff in there because the EHR company hasn't caught up to 2021 yet. So just because it's in there, y'all don't have to be doing that stuff anymore. So just make sure that you're showing what the purpose was today. Stick to today. Make it shorter, sweeter. You can spend more time with the patient, less time clicking and pointing and doing all that junk around, and just get to the business of why you're there. And then I think it'll be even a better patient experience too. And we see, oh yeah, Christine also said, or the provider hasn't activated the template. Yes, I have seen that too, where the EHR company has said, well, they're in there, you just have to turn it on. And they didn't realize that. I still go into practices, they don't realize that there's been updates, which is just nuts to me now that we're in 2024. But that's what happens. So any more cloning comments, Sol, my friend?
When it comes to that EMR, right, the vendor. So like we said, these new templates they're claiming have been available since 2021. So we need to have better processes at play in terms of the teams at the practices, right? Who's in charge of communication between the EMR company and the practice and the entity, right? So, yeah, communication and transparency is sorely lacking. I just sent an email back today from some presentation I gave somewhere talking about this very thing for improving communications between the EMR people and your practice, right? Because it's unnecessary placement of risk on our providers when they continue to utilize these outdated templates from 1995 and 1997, right? All that does, the onus is always going to be on the practice, right? Is they are using these unnecessary, very lengthy, voluminous, check the box, check the box, check the box type of templates that are unnecessary in this new landscape. So that's another point, food for thought, is we need to talk to who is the buy-in here, right? For the leadership at these practices, at these entities, and who is in charge to communicate directly with the EMR or the EHR people to help them show them where do I hit activate, right? To start using the new templates that are apparently there. And so many of these people are saying, oh, we've had them there for all of this time. But I find that a little bit, I'm not really sure, because there's so many of these EMR companies that are now providing all of this CYA stuff, which obviously they have to CYA, right?
Yeah.
But you and I have seen way too many records that we audit that are voluminous in documentation that we have to audit through unnecessarily for today's dates of encounter. So
Yeah.
sorry to vent there, but that's my opinion on we need to communicate much more effectively with those EMR people.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes people will get an EHR and they, start using it and think that, well, every time anything happens, it's just going to seamlessly do all these things and update and that's not how it works.
Nope.
So I think it's a great tip to people to make sure there's somebody in the practice as kind of the point person for your vendor. So because when you have issues too, rather than 5 different calls or 5 different people trying to figure out who to call, if there's a point person in the office, it can be like, oh, Susie, we're having a problem with this. And, they know at the vendor who to contact, whoever the salesperson or rep or whoever from the company then, to kind of help with those things. Because I also had another company where they did have the updated E&M templates in there, but you had to purchase them.
Yes, and you do have to purchase. You do have to purchase. It's an investment, right? And that's what our providers have to understand as well, is this was an overhaul, right? So yes, there are so many of the EMR companies that are going to put a price tag on this new style, this new structure that they've had to develop, right? To make these compliant templates for the new 2021, 2023, 2024 guidelines and beyond. And as we know, things are, always changing here in healthcare. So hold on, there may be more changes again to these types of things in the future, right? So it is an investment. But that's why these conversations are very, very helpful to make sure that you are doing things correctly, because we are living in an EHR world. It should all be electronic. So,
and you pay a lot of money for your EHR, whichever one you're using. So it kind of is, silly to dig your feet in over, a charge for something that in comparison to what you've paid, to
That's
say,
right.
well, yeah, but we're not going to use the latest stuff because,
Because I already
so
paid 25 grand for the old
yeah,
stuff. Like, well, the old
yeah,
stuff doesn't work anymore, right?
yeah.
So
It's old. That's what.
we have to make smart decisions and not be so stubborn and dig our heels in, right? Because change has happened.
Yep.
So we have
Yep.
to get with the program. Yeah,
Which is what our industry is all about. But
that's
Christine
right. That's
also,
right.
16 pages and why was the patient there? Oh, I've seen those so many times.
I don't know. I
Um,
don't know why, because
yeah.
I'm busy reading through 16 pages from 2017, right? I don't know what happened
Yeah.
today.
Yep. That's the thing. Just be concise. Why are they there? What did you do? What's your treatment plan? You could just go
Yes.
on to the next patient. We don't need the thing of, since the patient was born and all that kind of stuff,
Oh, no. Yeah. No,
just kind of get on with the business. Um,
that's right.
well, Christine, also, we upgrade equipment. The EMR also requires to be upgraded. So, yeah, software is just like anything else. I mean, you do software updates to your computer. So,
That's right.
just your laptop that you're using or any of the stuff you use, your car updates the stuff in it. So, yeah, just really people bite the bullet, do what you
Right.
need to do to make
Right.
sure you're using the appropriate
Yeah.
things to make everybody's life easier.
Yes.
So you're not doing all this over documenting for really no reason. It's just wasting the physician and APP's time with the
Yes.
patients when, as I said, they could be, spending some more face to face with them.
Hmm.
So good. Yeah, that was a good question too.
Yep.
And then we
Another good one.
have about data. We had a question about data,
Yep.
about reviewing records that a patient brought with them for their E&M visit. So the question was, if a physician reviews ED records from a patient that includes the physician notes and lab and x-rays, can these be counted separately for data? So what they wanted to know was, can they count external review of external notes and review of lab and review of x-ray? Now, in this question, I don't know how many labs or how many x-rays, but let's say it was 2 x-rays and 3 labs. So could they get like 6 points for this, basically, if they did it that way? And this, I get this question a lot about the data stuff when they're bringing in some of these other things. And in this instance, the answer is no. If they're reviewing all of that together, it's considered one source. And so it may be that you might want to consider if coding by time, depending on how voluminous that
Mm,
source information is, maybe coding by time
interesting.
may be something that would grant you a higher evaluation and management level. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there, that if that does take a long time for them to take a look at, plus seeing the patient and doing everything else that they're doing, maybe coding by time could be considered. But the AMA put out in some of their past documents on evaluation management, when they do the updates and they do the errata, and they do put those out quite often, by the way. So for those of y'all that are listening, make sure that you go to the AMA's website. It's ama-assn.org, and you sign up. You can sign up to get notices about E&M stuff. So when they do put something new out or something has changed and they're putting a thing out about it, you'll get a notice that, hey, there's something different over here about E&M, and then you can go look at it. Because sometimes if you're not on top of stuff, a change might have occurred and you don't know it changed. So, because we can't watch everything, which is why I like our community on LinkedIn
Mm,
and Facebook, and, because people are posting, hey, did you see this? Or, hey, I read that. So that we're kind of, notifying each other of these different things. But in one of theirs, the AMA, it was in their technical corrections that they said that since they're one accounting, they're one source and should be counted as one. is what the AMA, when question was put to them about the same kind of issue. So no, you can't count it as 5 or 3 or 6 or however many it was. You need to count it as one because it's one external source document. And then, just the documentation in general about labs and x-rays in that data column. I mean, I could go on for a while about the deficiencies I still see there. Do you want to make any comments about the data column deficiencies, Sonal? So I don't seem like I'm ranting at everybody the whole time.
No, you're not ranting at all, because I too get that question that this person posed, right? Perhaps our providers put the questions to their reimbursement people, right, who are trying to send those types of claims out the door, right? It's a great question, because can they elevate their score, because there's so much voluminous documentation that's coming in from this Acme hospital from somewhere else, right? That's the most important thing that the AMA put out in their green text back in 2021. That's still in our CPT code books, right? It's that external source of documentation. It is one place. So if I'm the patient and I'm coming in with my packet of information that I got from my Acme hospital, because I went there first, right? And I asked for everything because I knew I was going to this other physician with all of my packet of labs, my x-ray films, my head scans, everything. I had to get it all looked at by this other doctor, right? All my entire packet came from one place, right? It's an external one place type of thing. So even though your new physician is looking at this packet, this large packet, they're analyzing each and every piece of documentation from that one source. So you made a great point that perhaps it's a good idea to look in those types of instances that will it be better for you to score your E&M for that encounter based on time. Because you know what? It might take you quite some time to read through that packet, right? To help you gain a better understanding of what your evaluation, management, and treatment for me is going to be at that encounter, right? So I thought that was a great point that you made, that instead of just relying then on the MDM, because it might not be as beneficial to you, again, based on the problems addressed as well as risk, we just don't know,
Right.
hypothetically. But hypothetically, time could be increased, right? Because we are allowed to count time when we review that type of documentation. And we put down in our EMR systems that it took us this much time to analyze all of these multiple labs, x-ray films, and head scans, right? So
Yep.
that's a really good point. But yes, the data column today in 2024 continues to be misunderstood and causes continued confusion, despite all of our education. And we try to help our practices, but there's definitely room for improvement because they do get confused between all
Yeah.
of the multiple points that are involved in that column.
Yeah, and I think those old habits die hard too, because what
Yeah.
I'll see a lot still, excuse me, is labs ordered.
Oh, yes. We have to get
How
rid
many
of the vague.
how many
Yeah.
labs? You know,
I don't know.
I can actually give you credit, but you had to tell me. Or
Right.
reviewed x-rays. Again,
How
how
many?
many x-rays?
That's
So
right.
uh, and I think that's just from the old days when I don't care if you order 1 or 5 or 10, it's 1 point.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter. So they just shorten everything up. And so now, that it does matter, yeah, it's hard for them to break that habit.
That's right.
And data for some specialties, ortho is one of them. They rely heavily on the data section for
For
stuff.
sure.
So you want to make sure, that they're getting all that credit. Certain other specialties may use a lot for ordering and different scans and labs and things if they're in like an endocrinology or different kinds of fields.
Yeah.
You're doing pediatrics, you're probably ordering a whole bunch of labs sometimes when you got those sick little babies coming in and you don't know what's going on. And I actually heard there was one consultant whose advice was to ignore the data column
Oh my
when
goodness.
when you're figuring out your MDM, when you're figuring out your level. They said just use your presenting problem and use your risk, and just do your level that way. Just don't even bother with that middle column because there's so much going on in there. Just ignore it. And for some practices, maybe using the problem presented and the risk might get them the appropriate level, even if, the data column was looked, it would match, but for some others, it might not. And, that data column can be very important. So, for those of y'all, again, that are watching this, make sure that you understand that second column for your data and what those different categories are and how to meet each of the categories. So it's required, like the independent interpretation, of the things, that from back in the day, has changed a little bit to where it just used to be independent visualization. So you just had to say you looked at it. Well, now they expect independent visualization and interpretation. So you need to say something about it, right? So there's those kind of little tweaks and things that you want to make sure that, you're getting the credit that you deserve in the data column, in any of the columns. We just can't rely on the fact that, with all of the pay cuts and the conversion factor going down and all these other things, practices are struggling. And so if you are doing the work for the complexity of whatever the condition is your patient has, you darn well should be getting paid for it and paid for it appropriately. And you need to get paid for it appropriately. So don't overlook that data column, but understand it and document for it, right?
That's right. That is
Sorry, I
right.
ranted
That
again.
is, no, that is spot on. You just reminded me that I have an article coming out in NAMUS in a few weeks where I directly talk about the independent interpretation portion of
Right.
the data column for our orthopedic types of practices, right? And how I continue to see it as an audit hazard. So yeah, we really do need to take the time and celebrate these new columns. I mean, they're not new. Our providers have been aware of them since the old guidelines. There's just been a lot of improvement, in our opinion, for, how our providers, physicians, and the APPs can embrace the new definitions, the new structure in each of the columns to help better support their higher level of thinking, right? Because now it can all be counted. Like you said, in the old ways, they didn't care, right, about how many x-rays or scans you looked at because you only got that 1 point, like you said, only
Yep.
1 point back in the old days. Right now, in today's times, give us a number of x-rays reviewed. Please tell us that you reviewed 7. Give us a number so we can help support your score in that column appropriately. Yeah, that was a great point. So yeah, that particular question that came in was spot on for that external source, right? We have to understand that the source is only one. It only came from one place. So yeah. despite all of the labs and scans that came in. It came in from that one place.
Boy, and the way you said old way just makes me even feel old, the way in the old ways.
No, and like you said, old habits are hard to break. And so I know we're in this for the long haul. Like we've only had 3 years in here, right? For the
Yeah.
office and outpatient stuff to have
Well,
changed.
and only one really for all the other stuff other
For
than
all the
office.
others. Right. And so, we're still in new times. So that's why I know you and I talk all the time to our providers that it's all about this continuing education is needed. We can't
Yeah.
just think, oh, it happened a few years ago, so we're done with the teaching, right? No.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to keep reinforcing the education. So eventually it will become second nature to give us a number of labs reviewed
Yes.
or,
Please.
right? Exactly. Exactly.
And then Christine makes again another great point about medical necessity. Can't forget that. And that the data is medically necessary. Not that my podiatrist is looking at my brain MRI. Oh, maybe he really likes the brain MRIs. You never know, Christine. But yeah, like why was it necessary to order this or look at that? We should always, have an eye on medical necessity. And anytime we're doing audits, so will I, Christine also, I'm sure, that's something that we always have to temper everything that we look at is it medically necessary? So yes, yeah. So wonderful. All right. And then we had another question about pre-op stuff. So the pre-op stuff is again another forever thing. This has been around like for a long time about pre-op questions. I don't see a need for pre-op clearance in the note. What do I tell my provider? Well, for me, the first thing I would ask, and then so I'll toss it to you, is, from the question standpoint, if this is the coder, query your provider because you're not a clinician.
Yeah.
I mean, just because you don't see the need, it might be in the note and you don't pick up on it because you're not a physician. So, I mean, if we're going on a level playing field here and saying it's actually needed for this patient, then our next question is, how do we go about this stuff with the pre-op stuff? And the pre-op clearance thing has been a problem or an issue with Medicare for quite a long time. And other payors are picking up on it now because of the whole issue that Christine just threw out there with the data is medical necessity. What is the medical necessity of the pre-op clearance? If you're doing it because you don't want to do the physical, you want their PCP to do it, oh, I've got, I'm a surgeon. I got people coming in and out of here. I don't have time to do that stuff. Go and have your doctor do it. That's really not medically necessary. And not that it's not medically necessary to do one, but it's bundled in your surgical package, right? That's my whole thing. That is, part of the global surgery package you get paid for is doing that H&P. So if you're sending them somewhere else and someone else is doing it, well, they want to get paid for what they're doing, right? So then you have that whole thing. So you're, from a payor standpoint, I'm paying you, the surgeon, for the whole package, but you're farming out the H&P just because you don't feel like doing it. And so now I'm expected to go pay again to somebody else to do it. That's where like the payors are starting to have some or have had some issues with things. And I totally get that, right, Sonal?
Yeah, I get that. The payers take issue with a lot. But we also have to remember that our hospitals, our ASCs, our facilities have the right to have their own internal guidelines for how pre-op things are done, right? So if they demand that there needs to be a pre-op clearance for this type of patient population, they have to have a pre-op clearance. period, right? And then it's just a matter of them figuring out what they're going to do with those billed claims, right? They'll have a policy for that as well. So it's kind of twofold, and it's become more complicated as the years have gone by because the payers are resisting, right? They don't necessarily want to see the pre-op clearance for a very specific type of patient population, right? So again, if our providers can be more clear in their documentation for why these patients have these pre-existing stressors, right, that will elevate if this particular type of surgical intervention takes place, all of that documentation can help support the medical necessity for the pre-op clearance. Is the patient going to be stable enough to undergo what I want them to undergo, right? Based on what I think is the best treatment plan moving forward for my patient in this particular case. So it's complicated because both people are very, very important, in my opinion. The payer is very important, and the hospital is very important. And so we, again, have to play within the boundaries of both people then and just take it from there. That's what I would recommend, right? Is look at your own internal policies first and foremost before you cross over to the other side and look at what the payer wants.
Yeah, and because just because a hospital requires it doesn't mean that the payor has to pay for it. So
That's
you
right.
also have to, have that little moment with yourself where you realize, if this hospital says every patient has to have a pre-op EKG, every patient has to have a pre-op X-ray. I don't care what their things are. I don't care what they're doing it from a liability standpoint on their end. So just because it's a facility requirement doesn't mean it's medically necessary, and doesn't mean that a payor is going to pay for it. So, in cases like that, then, the patients may have some out-of-pocket expenses that come along with having those procedures done. And, if a patient is calling you, they need to then go to the hospital and make some comments to the hospital about those kinds of things that why. So you have to really think of those two things too. But if you want pre-op clearance, like you have a patient that has hypertension and COPD and CHF, and you want to do a procedure on them, and you're like, well, I don't know if you're, that great of a candidate to, be put under here. So we're going to send you to the cardiologist for them to tell me that you're okay to have this surgery, that you can withstand being under anesthesia, having this surgery and all that stuff. Well, now that to me is the valid cardiovascular clearance for surgery, not like a pre-op H&P physical kind of thing. So that's clearance, but that's what you have to put down in the medical record due to, like you were saying, Sono, the stressors, right? Due to A, B, C, and D, need to get, required to get, patient requires, just any kind of language you want to use, that it's necessary. They must get this before I can proceed with surgery. Those are the things that you'd be looking for in the note to substantiate it. And if you don't see that, that's when you want to go to that physician, that surgeon, and say, hey, I see this patient is coming up, and I see, we're having these issues coming, and, why do you need this clearance? Why are they going over there? It's not clear in the note. Could you please maybe make an addendum into the note, that's stating what the medical necessity is of these things? Since those are involved in your decision making, they're factoring in on it, put those ICD-10 codes on the claim form, because you're not treating it, but it is affecting their treatment, because you said they can't have surgery till somebody else says it's okay. So that all goes to show it. And to be able to do that has to be in there. That goes back to my old, if you think it, ink it, right?
That's
so
right.
all that thought processes has to go down in the documentation to be able to support everything. All right. Well, oh goodness, we're almost at the end of our time already, Sonal. So,
Oh my goodness, already. Wow,
and it was
fast.
weird not having all of our friends interacting a lot with us today, except for the lovely Christine, which we appreciate so much, being able to throw us some questions and going over to Facebook, and Barbara for going over to Facebook and joining us today. I know it was tough for people to find us, and I see that the link still isn't, LinkedIn still hasn't corrected it. So we'll have to run this on LinkedIn on a replay. So those of y'all that were looking for us on LinkedIn, just, throw us out some questions in the stuff when you watch it, and we'll check on it and answer questions in there that you have, or, we'll save them for the next quarterly update too.
That's
so,
right.
Remember, every quarter we're going to be throwing one of these out there. As far as E&M goes too, Sonal and I will be presenting at the IAHEMA conference in Iowa, where we will be speaking on a couple E&M things. We're going to do medical decision making, and I'm going to talk about modifiers, which is kind of E&M because, of course, modifier 25 will always come in there. And then Sonal's going to be speaking on compliance, and of course, E&M, I'm sure, is going to come up in that conversation. And we're together going to also be speaking about CDI. So, if you are in the area or in the surrounding states, you can go to the link there and take a look and check out the annual meeting, April 11th and 12th. And Sonal, of course, you can find her on LinkedIn. I have her profile, also her company's profile for SP Collaborative. And then emailing Sonal, you can find her at sonal@spcollaborative.net. And then her website, of course, is spcollaborative.net, which makes it nice and easy to roll off, right?
That's right.
But also for E&M, as this is our quarterly topic on E&M when we're discussing it, Sonal and I also have created some digital e-tools, some E&M e-tools that are downloadable that can go through, and you can click on the tool, and we have them in 5 different categories, and they have tips and examples on one side and the codes, and then the MDM table on the other side. You can, download them and use them, reprint, print one out if you want it printed out. You can laminate it if you want to laminate it. Some people get laminating crazy with things. And they start at like $5.99. So they're very inexpensive. We wanted to make them a tool that was both useful and inexpensive for people, so that people that are newer into E&M, you're like, I don't want to be sinking money left and right into everything, because everything costs something these days. But these are very good tools, and the people that are using them, we get great feedback on them. So you can go take a look at the e-tools. I also, from an E&M standpoint, have some physical tools that are my desk reference tool and my pocket tool. So those coding tools are physical ones, and they're not laminated. They're made with this funky plastic. I don't know where my designer found these, but I love the way that they're made. So you can use wet erase markers on them and then wipe them off and reuse them. And, so if you're trying to show a physician or an APP something, you can like be circling things on there and then just spritz it and wipe it off and then go to the next one. They come in, a desk size, which is like the 8.5 by 11, and then the pocket size, which will fit in a doctor's white coat, so they can just carry them around with them. So that makes them very handy. And I will also be having an E&M workshop in March. So the E&M workshop will be on March 23rd. It's a Saturday from 11 to 3 Eastern time. And it will be, if you attend live, you can get 8 CEUs for it. You'll get 4 CEUs for attending the live portion. And then you can access an additional 4 CEUs if you go and complete the quiz afterwards, the CEU quiz. So it's normally $225, but until March 14th. If you use the promo code EM Live, it'll take the price down to $199. And that includes the CEUs and the workbook and one of the coding tools I was talking about to use in the class. So that's something else that I've got going on. So the company's site is there on the announcement here, www.chcs.consulting. And you can find the workshop. The tools are there on that website. So go check them out. And Christine made a nice comment. Thank you so much, Christine. We put a lot of thought into these and making them something that'll be helpful for people. Plus, easy to use and useful, that it's not wasting money on something that's all, just a bunch of garbage. It's good information and it's got examples in it. So it'll help you with using it. And it's got the codes in it. And some of them have portions of the guidelines that are discussed in there too. So check them out. We think y'all will like them. And again, I monopolized that last few minutes talking about this thing. So is there anything that you would like to say about them?
Yeah, no. I think our tools are just as fabulous as you do, right? Because we know this was a big change, right? That we all had to endure in 2021. So we really wanted to develop them to help our coding community out, right? Make things a little more easier to understand with our tips and examples as well, right? Which are not provided by the AMA. So we wanted to go ahead and go that extra step. And like you had said, they are, cost efficient for our community as well. So they really are useful to have at the ready when you're doing your everyday work. So I think they're remarkable. And yeah, definitely come out to see us if you guys can in the Midwest here in April. It'll be a good time to come on out to the Midwest for spring, not winter here.
The tornado.
Not the tornadoes, right? Hopefully those will be gone by April.
Yes, we hope, yes. Well, but just having them in February has been kind of weird. They don't usually get them,
strange.
That early. I think in Florida we had one in February, and it was like the first time like ever. So just kind of weird anomaly things, it kind of goes around. But good. Well, thanks y'all for joining us for our E&M Quarterly. We haven't really talked about when we're going to have the next one. I mean, it'll be next quarter, but we haven't talked about what specific month yet, but be watching for it because we'll have it. So thanks, Sonal, for joining me as always. It's always so much fun. Oh, and don't forget to watch our compliance capers on Fridays. We have our not little, I don't mean to say it that way, but we have our compliance broadcast that comes on LinkedIn and Facebook, and it'll be on both of our YouTube channels. For compliance capers, it's 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. A nice good Friday kickoff. We have just a little casual chats, but we talk about specific compliance things and how they can be put into play in your in y'all's practices. And we're doing this month, we are talking about OIG work plan items, which are really, really cool. Someone will pick some really great ones for us to discuss. So I think y'all will really like that. So if you follow me or follow Sonal, you will get notices and get invites when we're holding those, so you don't forget. But we always do them on Fridays, always at 10 or 11, depending on your time zone. So you can just kind of set it up in your calendar so you don't miss us, because those are good and they're a lot of fun too. I have a lot of fun doing those with you. So appreciate that. It was a great idea we had doing these. So it's fun. If you like watching us banter here, I think we do even more bantering sometimes on that one.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Oh my goodness.
But thank you. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you.
we will see y'all, or I will see y'all on the next healthcare happenings. I'm sure Sonal will be watching if she can. So we will see y'all next time to see what is happening in healthcare. So thanks for joining. Bye, y'all.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.